Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the hardest heartbreak isn't losing someone you loved. It's letting go of someone you never truly had. That person who lived in your mind more than in your life. The fantasy that kept you up at night. The what if that haunted every thought. You weren't grieving their presence. You were grieving the story you wrote about them. And that's why it hurts so deeply. But what if I told you the pain you feel is not proof of what you lost? It's proof of how much power you have to reclaim. Stay with me, because once you see the truth, you'll never chase an illusion again. And letting go of someone you never had is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, because it forces you to mourn something that only lived inside your mind. It's not the absence of a real relationship you're grieving. It's the loss of a dream, the loss of a version of the story you thought you'd have, the loss of the future you imagined. That kind of loss is intangible, and yet it feels just as heavy, just as sharp, sometimes even more unbearable than the end of something real. Because when we lose someone we never had, there are no memories to fall back on, no evidence of love exchanged, no validation that it was mutual. All we're left with is a painful echo of what if, and that is a haunting sound. And you see, the human mind is a powerful storyteller. We can meet someone, feel a spark, have a few conversations, and suddenly we start weaving a whole novel in our heads. We imagine what life would be like with them, how they'd hold us, how they'd love us, how they'd fit into our future. That story becomes so vivid that our body and heart react as though it's real. When it doesn't happen, when they pull away, when they don't choose us, we're not just letting go of a person, we're letting go of an entire world we built. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why it hurts so deeply. But here's the truth. Just because you imagine something doesn't mean you lost it. The reality is, if someone never chose to show up for you, if they never gave you their love, their commitment, their presence, you are not letting go of them. You're letting go of an illusion. And as painful as that is, it's also liberating, because illusions keep us trapped. They keep us hanging on to scraps of attention, to the smallest gestures, thinking they mean more than they actually do. They keep us checking our phone, waiting for the text that doesn't come, analyzing every word for meaning, even though the reality has already spoken. And the hardest part about letting go of someone you never had is accepting that you were alone in the vision. And yet, the moment you embrace that truth, you reclaim your power. You stop waiting for someone who isn't coming. You stop begging for validation from someone who was never capable of giving it. You stop assigning worth to someone else's attention and start building your life on your own terms. And think about it. Every second you spend clinging to someone who was never yours is a second you rob yourself of being open to someone who could be. Every day you waste on replaying their mixed signals, their half-hearted words, their lack of effort, is a day you deny yourself the love you truly deserve. And the cruel irony is, when you're stuck in that fantasy, you don't even see the opportunities around you. You don't see the people who are genuinely interested, who would actually show up. You're too busy chasing a ghost. And letting go isn't about forgetting the person. It's about dismantling the story you wrote about them. It's about recognizing that the reason you're hurting is not because of who they were, but because of who you thought they might be. You fell for potential. You invested in a possibility. And possibilities, as intoxicates, as they are, can also be prisons. And so how do you free yourself? You begin by grounding yourself in reality. You remind yourself of what actually happened, not what you wished happened. Did they call when they said they would? Did they make space for you in their life? Did they show up consistently, not just when it was convenient? The answers to those questions tell you everything you need to know. If the reality doesn't match the fantasy, then you know the fantasy has to go. And then you shift the focus. Instead of asking, why didn't they choose me? You start asking, why am I choosing someone who isn't choosing me? That shift is where your strength lies, because suddenly the power dynamic changes. You're no longer the one waiting, hoping, aching. You're the one deciding. You're the one saying no more. You're the one drawing the line. And when you do that, something incredible happens. You realize that the story you've been writing in your head doesn't need to end with heartbreak. It can end with empowerment. It can end with you walking away, not broken, but stronger. because you see now that you don't need someone else to validate your worth. You don't need their attention to feel alive. You don't need their love to believe you are lovable. And what you need is to start choosing yourself, to start investing in the life you want, not the one you imagined with someone who never deserved to be the lead role in your story. You need to recognize that your energy, your love, your loyalty, your time, those are precious resources, and giving them to someone who doesn't value them is like pouring water into a desert and expecting flowers to bloom. And you deserve reciprocity. You deserve effort. You deserve someone who sees you and says, I choose you, not maybe, not someday, not when it's convenient, but right now, every day. And the moment you internalize that truth, the pain of letting go begins to transform. It doesn't disappear overnight. You'll still feel the ache. You'll still think of them. You'll still have moments where your mind drifts back to the fantasy. But with every step you take forward, you're rewiring your brain to understand that you lost nothing real. You only lost a story, and stories can be rewritten. And here's the beauty of letting go of someone you never had. It creates space. Space for healing, space for clarity, space for someone new, and most importantly, space for you to grow into the person who will no longer settle for almost, maybe, or someday. You become the person who knows their worth so deeply that you'd rather be alone than entertained by someone who won't commit. And when that shift happens, your energy changes. You carry yourself differently. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer beg, you choose. You no longer shrink to fit into someone's half interest because you know you are worth someone's full attention. And so letting go of someone you never had is not the end, it's the beginning. The beginning of a life where your heart is no longer chained to illusions. The beginning of a story where you are not waiting for someone to save you, but where you save yourself. And from that place of strength, from that place of clarity, from that place of self-love, the right people can finally find you, because you'll no longer be hidden behind the shadow of someone who never showed up. You'll be standing in the light, ready to receive the love you've always deserved. And then when you finally step into that light, you begin to realize that life has been waiting for you all along. Opportunities, friendships, passions, and yes, real love. These things cannot find you when you are consumed by a person who never belonged to you. They cannot thrive in soil that has been taken over by weeds of false hope. But when you pull those weeds out, when you reclaim that space in your heart, you create fertile ground for something real to grow. And this is where the real shift happens. Because letting go isn't just about removing someone from your thoughts. It's about reintroducing yourself to yourself. You start asking questions you haven't asked in a long time. What do I love? What lights me up? What kind of life do I want to design for myself? Who do I want to be when I wake up in the morning? Suddenly you're not thinking about whether they texted you back. You're thinking about whether you're proud of the person you're becoming. That's the kind of transformation that changes everything. And you see, when you're holding on to someone you never had, you're often holding on to a version of yourself that is smaller than you're capable of being. You shrink to fit into the spaces they leave for you. You bend to accommodate their lack of effort. You silence parts of yourself so they don't feel overwhelmed. But once you let go, once you decide that you will no longer negotiate your worth, you begin to expand. You take up the space you were always meant to take up. You stop apologizing for your desires, your standards, your voice. And think about how much mental and emotional energy goes into obsessing over someone who doesn't truly want to be there. Every unanswered message becomes a puzzle. Every vague word becomes a riddle. Every absence becomes something you try to explain away. That cycle drains you. It exhausts your spirit. But when you step out of it, you reclaim all that energy. And when you redirect it toward your own growth, you become unstoppable. You might pick up a hobby you abandoned, pursue a career move you delayed, or finally take the trip you always dreamed of. You might look in the mirror one day and realize you are no longer waiting for permission to live. You are giving yourself permission. And the beautiful irony is this: when you let go of the one you never had, you often attract people who reflect back the love you've been giving yourself, because people feel it. They sense when you've raised your standards, when you've built a life you love, when why. are no longer searching for someone to fill your emptiness. You become magnetic, not because you're chasing anyone, but because you're rooted in your own strength. That's the paradox of letting go. The more you release, the more you gain. And let's be honest, sometimes we hold on because we're afraid. Afraid that if we let this person go, no one else will come along. Afraid that the connection we felt was once in a lifetime. Afraid that love might never feel that strong again. But here's the truth. Love is not meant to be pain wrapped in hope. Love is not meant to be confusion disguised as passion. Real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that lifts you higher, is consistent. It is intentional. It is mutual. If what you felt with this person was mostly uncertainty, waiting, and disappointment, then what you're afraid of losing is not love. It's addiction to the high of possibility. And that's why letting go feels like withdrawal. Because you've been feeding on the crumbs of attention, and your brain has confused those crumbs for a feast. But when you walk away, when you endure the discomfort of withdrawal, you eventually discover what real nourishment feels like. You begin to realize that you don't have to starve. You don't have to survive on scraps. You can have the full meal, the love that is given freely, consistently, abundantly. And there's a freedom that comes with letting go of someone you never had. You no longer live in the tension of maybe. You no longer wait for their half-hearted efforts to line up with your full-hearted commitment. You no longer lie awake wondering if they're thinking of you. Because you accept that the answer doesn't matter. What matters is how you think of yourself. And the more you cultivate that love inward, the less you crave it outward from people who can't give it. And imagine the version of yourself who fully lets go, the one who is no longer stuck in the cycle of waiting and hoping, the one who wakes up excited for the day, who invests in friendships that are nourishing, who builds goals that have nothing to do with someone else's approval. That version of you is powerful. That version of you is magnetic. And that version of you is possible the moment you stop pouring energy into someone who was never really there. And this is about reclaiming your standards. You don't just want someone who texts you back. You want someone who makes you feel safe, desired, and valued. You don't just want someone who notices you. You want someone who invests in you. You don't just want a connection that makes your heart race for a moment. You want a partnership that sustains you for a lifetime. That level of love doesn't come from clinging to someone who can't even show up in the present. It comes from having the courage to let go and make room for what's real. And then here's the paradox. You may still think about them. You may still dream about the life you imagined. You may still feel the ache in quiet moments. But that doesn't mean you're failing at moving on. Healing isn't about erasing. It's about integrating. It's about acknowledging, yes, I cared. Yes, I wanted it. Yes, it hurt. And then choosing every day to redirect your focus to what's ahead instead of what's behind. Progress is not measured by how little you think of them, but by how much more you invest in yourself. And it takes courage to walk away from a story that never unfolded. It takes strength to say, this wasn't mine, but something else will be. It takes faith to believe that the universe, life, whatever you want to call it, has something better in store for you. And that faith is not blind. It's built on evidence. Because every time you've let go in the past, something new has always come. Every time you've released what wasn't right, you've eventually found something that was. And so as you move forward, remember this. You are not empty because someone never gave you their love. You are not broken because someone never chose you. You are not unworthy because someone couldn't see your value. You are whole. You are strong. You are capable of building a life so full that anyone who doesn't meet your standards will simply fade into the background. And then the day will come when you look back on this person and realize they were never the one. They were simply the lesson. They taught you what you don't want. They showed you the difference between fantasy and reality. They pushed you back toward yourself. And maybe, just maybe, they were the catalyst you needed to become the person who will be ready for the love you've always deserved. And maybe that's the hidden gift in all of this, the lesson disguised as pain. Because when you learn to let go of someone you never had, you also learn to break free from the patterns that kept you stuck. You begin to recognize the ways you've been betraying yourself. You notice how often you ignored your own needs just to hold on to the faint possibility of being chosen. You see how many times you silenced your intuition, convincing yourself that the red flags weren't really there, that the lack of effort wasn't a lack of interest, that the confusion meant depth instead of avoidance. And as those realizations sink in, you reclaim the wisdom you lost in the haze of hope. And there's an honesty that surfaces when you no longer cling to the illusion. You admit to yourself that you weren't in love with them. You were in love with the version of them that existed in your mind. And that honesty is liberating, because once you know the truth, you can stop fighting reality. You can stop waiting for someone to become who you imagined. And instead, you can start seeing them for who they actually are. And when you see clearly, letting go becomes less about loss and more about alignment. You're not giving up. You're choosing not to fight for a seat at a table that was never set for you in the first place. And the human heart is resilient, but it's also tender. It bruises easily when fed on false promises. That's why letting go requires compassion, not just for the other person, but for yourself. You must forgive yourself for falling for the fantasy. You must forgive yourself for wanting it so badly that you ignored the truth. You must forgive yourself for investing in someone who wasn't investing back. That forgiveness is not weakness, it's strength, because once you forgive yourself, you release the shame that keeps you tethered to the story. You stop saying, "How could I be so foolish?" And instead you begin saying, "I was human, I wanted love, I saw possibility, and now I know better." And knowing better is everything. Knowing better means you no longer confuse inconsistency with mystery. Knowing better means you stop mistaking mixed signals for passion. Knowing better means you start holding people accountable for what they actually do, not what you hope they'll do. Knowing better is what transforms you from someone who waits for love to someone who demands it. But here's the beautiful part. You don't become bitter in the process, because letting go isn't about closing your heart. It's about strengthening it. It's about saying, "I deserve love, but I deserve it in the form of truth, not fantasy." You don't shut down. You don't build walls so high that no one can get in. Instead, you build standards. You create boundaries. You cultivate a sense of worth that refuses to settle for anything less than mutual, intentional, real love. And then from that place, life begins to shift. Conversations feel different because you're no longer analyzing every word for hidden meaning. Dates feel different because you're not desperate to be chosen. You're observing whether this person aligns with your values, whether they show up in ways that matter. Relationships feel different because you're not fighting to hold on to someone who doesn't want to stay. You're building something with someone who is already present, already committed, already choosing you without hesitation. And that is the reward of letting go of someone you never had. You create the space for someone who wants to have you fully, not halfway, not sometimes, not only when it's convenient, fully. And you start to realize that anything less than that isn't worth your energy. But let's be real, the process isn't neat. You don't just wake up one day, say, "I'm letting go," and never think of them again. Healing is messy. You'll have days where you feel strong, where you're focused on yourself, where you barely think about them at all. And then you'll have days where the memories, or the imagined memories, hit you like a wave. You'll hear a song, see a place, stumble across an old message, and suddenly it feels like you're right back at the beginning. That's normal. That doesn't mean you're not moving forward. Healing isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. Every time you circle back, you come with more awareness, more strength, more resilience than before. And what matters is that you keep choosing yourself in those moments. You keep reminding yourself that the story you're missing was never real. You keep grounding yourself in the truth that you cannot lose what you never truly had. And you keep moving step by step into the life that is waiting for you. And think about all the things you've put on hold because of this person. The energy you could have used to start something new. The love you could have poured into friendships, family, passions, your own growth. Every ounce of energy you gave away to them is now available for you. And when you start to redirect that energy, life feels richer. You become more present in the things that matter. You start seeing opportunities you missed. As said before, you start creating experiences that remind you of your worth. And slowly you begin to realize that letting go isn't just about them. It's about returning home to yourself. It's about reclaiming the parts of you that got lost in the waiting. The part of you that is playful, the part of you that is ambitious, the part of you that is creative, adventurous, bold, the part of you that doesn't apologize for wanting more. When you reconnect with those parts, you stop grieving what you lost and start celebrating what you've gained. And one day, almost without realizing it, you'll notice the ache has softened. The hold they had on you is weaker. The thoughts of them no longer consume your day. You might even smile when you think of them, not because you want them back, but because you're grateful for what you learned. They were the chapter that reminded you of your strength. They were the test that pushed you to elevate your standards. They were the mirror that reflected back where you still needed to grow. And this is how you reclaim your story, not by erasing the person, but by integrating the lesson. Not by denying what you felt, but by redefining what it meant. You don't let them become the reason you stop believing in love. You let them become the reason you start believing in yourself. And when you truly embody that belief, everything changes. You stop fearing that you'll never feel that kind of intensity again. You stop doubting whether you'll ever be chosen. You stop questioning whether you're enough, because you know that the love you're looking for is not about intensity without consistency or chemistry without commitment. It's about depth, safety, trust, and joy. And those things don't come from holding on to someone who never offered them. They come from being brave enough to let go so you can finally receive what's real. And those things, the ones that are real, only find their way into your life when you make room for them. You cannot hold on to the illusion of someone who never chose you and expect space for someone worse. Oh, Will, your heart is not infinite real estate. If it's filled with the weight of what could have been, there's no room for what actually could be. That's why letting go is not just an act of courage, it's an act of faith. Faith that the space you're creating is not empty forever, but an invitation for something better to step in. But here's the challenge. We often confuse letting go with losing. We think that if we release the fantasy, it means we've failed. It means we weren't good enough. It means we missed our one chance at love. And yet the exact opposite is true. Letting go is not losing. It's winning yourself back. It's reclaiming the energy, the attention, the joy, the power you've been giving away to someone who never gave it back. It's saying, I will no longer rent out my heart to someone who doesn't value the keys. That's not loss, that's victory. And then you know what happens when you win yourself back? You start to glow differently. People notice it. Friends comment that you seem lighter, freer. Strangers are drawn to your energy without knowing why. You carry yourself with a sense of dignity that doesn't come from someone else's validation. It comes from knowing you had the courage to walk away from what wasn't serving you. That kind of glow is magnetic, and it doesn't just attract love. It attracts opportunity, abundance, and peace. And you begin to realize that what you were craving all along wasn't really them. It was the feeling you thought they could give you. You wanted to feel chosen, special, seen, cherished, and that's human. But the mistake was outsourcing those feelings to someone who never earned the right to provide them. When you take those feelings back, when you decide that you can make yourself feel chosen, that you can create a life where you feel special, that you can surround yourself with people who truly see you, then the craving for that one unavailable person loses its power. And it's like chasing a mirage in the desert. You run toward it, convinced that water is just ahead, only to find sand. Over and over again, you run, you hope, you collapse. But the moment you stop, the moment you realize it was never water to begin with, you free yourself to look in another direction. And in that new direction lies an oasis you never noticed before because you were too fixated on the mirage. That's what letting go is, the decision to stop running after what was never real so you can find what is. And let's not forget, sometimes the hardest part isn't them, it's us. It's the voice in our head that says, but maybe if I had done more, said the right thing, looked a certain way, they would have wanted me. That voice is cruel. That voice keeps you trapped. But the truth is, The right person doesn't need you to twist yourself into a different shape to be chosen. The right person chooses you because of who you already are. If someone didn't step up, it's not because you weren't enough. It's because they weren't capable. Their inability to see your value does not erase your value. And in fact, one of the most powerful things you can do is stop asking, why didn't they want me? And start asking, why did I want them? Not in a way that shames you, but in a way that teaches you. What did they represent to you? Did they represent excitement? Did they represent validation? Did they represent the story you've always told yourself about who you should be with? Sometimes we chase people not because of who they are, but because of what they symbolize. And once you see that clearly, you can ask yourself if the symbol matches the substance. Most times it doesn't. And once you know that, letting go becomes less about loss and more about clarity. And think about how many times in your life you've held on to something that wasn't right, whether it was a job, a friendship, or a dream, and how every time you eventually let go, something better came to take its place. This situation is different. You are not doomed because this person didn't choose you. You are being redirected. And redirection is often the greatest gift life can give you because it steers you toward places you never would have gone on your own. But none of this happens unless you take the first step. And that first step is acceptance. Accepting that what you thought you had was not real. Accepting that the love you gave was not matched. Accepting that the story in your mind is not the story of your life. Acceptance is not resignation, it's power. Because once you accept reality, you stop fighting it. You stop exhausting yourself trying to turn someone into something they're not. And with that energy freed, you can finally build something better. And then comes the next step, vision. Creating a picture of what you actually want, not what you're willing to settle for. Write it down, speak it out loud, claim it. The kind of love you want, the kind of partner you want, the kind of life you want to live. The more specific you are, the easier it becomes to recognize when something or someone falls short. And when you see it clearly, you stop wasting time on half measures. You stop being seduced by potential. You stop waiting for maybe and start insisting on absolutely. And then here's what's remarkable. When you carry yourself with that kind of clarity, you stop chasing and start attracting. You stop begging for love and start radiating it. You stop hoping someone will complete you and start living so fully that anyone who joins you is simply adding to the richness of what already exists. That's when love finds you. Not when you're clinging to someone who never chose you, but when you're choosing yourself so completely that the right person has no doubt they want to choose you too. And this is why letting go is not the end, it's the beginning of a life where you are no longer defined by who didn't love you, but by how deeply you love yourself. The beginning of relationships that don't leave you confused, but ones that leave you grounded and secure.